We are getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
Just one sentence. And the entire investigation changed direction immediately. In the middle of a flood of questions from the media, one family member suddenly said, "I was there that night." At first it sounded like a normal explanation, but that single sentence locked the timeline of the whole case. The issue was not that it accused anyone, but that it placed one person exactly inside the most important time frame. And from that moment on, every statement, every movement, and every later detail had to be reviewed from the beginning. In the next few minutes, we are going to do 3 important things. Look back at what has been publicly confirmed, clearly separate what came from reported sources and what is only analysis, and then put everything together into one clear and easy-to-understand timeline. No conclusions for anyone. No quick judgment. Just each time mark each small detail placed in the right position. And sometimes the most frightening truth is hidden inside the things that seem the most ordinary. The background of this case began with the unusual disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie right inside her own home in Tucson, Arizona. At first, many people may have thought this was simply a case of an elderly person leaving home and losing contact, but the closer people looked, the harder it became to explain. There were 2 details that quickly drew attention. Nancy needed daily medication and lived with a pacemaker, so leaving home for a long time without preparation would have been very difficult. More importantly, the next morning, the signs left inside the house showed no sign of a planned trip, no clear luggage, no familiar preparation, and none of the usual items that go along with a deliberate decision to leave. That normal-looking but deeply unusual scene made this case stop looking like an ordinary missing person case. The content in this video is for informational and reference purposes only. Although it has been cross-referenced with reputable sources, some details may have changed or may not be entirely accurate. The first piece of the puzzle was also the detail that made many people stop and think there were no signs of forced entry. Inside the house, the phone was still there, the medicine was untouched, and personal belongings were still in their usual places. There was no scene of chaos, no signs of major disturbance, and especially no sign that someone had forced their way in from outside. This detail was extremely important because in many cases, the door is the first thing that tells the story. When there are no signs of a break-in, the range of possibilities becomes much smaller. Either the person inside opened the door willingly, or the person who entered already had access to the house. In other words, the question was no longer, did someone come in, but rather who could walk in without making anything seem unusual? And from there, the entire direction of the investigation began to change. The second piece appeared during the press conference when Tommaso Cheon, the son-in-law in the family, said one very short sentence that was enough to pull all attention toward him. "I was there that night." It must be made clear that being there does not mean any conclusion by itself. No one should be judged from one sentence alone. But from an investigative point of view, this detail had huge value because it placed one specific person inside the most important time frame of the case. From that moment on, every later statement, every movement, and every related piece of data could be compared to check consistency. This was not a conclusion, it was a time anchor that made the whole timeline much tighter. But what truly made the whole press room go silent was not just the sentence "I was there that night." That was important, but it was not the detail that changed every face in the room. The next sentence was the real turning point. A shorter sentence, softer, but one that forced the entire timeline to be re-examined from the beginning. Because sometimes what changes a case is not a long explanation, but one small detail said at the exact wrong or right moment, and once spoken. It cannot be taken back. According to the information repeated later, Tommaso added one more sentence that changed the whole direction of attention. She was not alone. Just one short line, but it placed the presence of a second person inside the house that night. And from that moment, the question was no longer where Nancy had gone, but who was there. When did that person arrive? When did they leave? During the time between the last time Nancy was seen and the next morning, what exactly happened? If there were no signs of forced entry, and if the cameras had missing gaps, then every detail pointed back to the same place, a stretch of time that needed to be examined minute by minute. Another piece that made the case more sensitive involved legal and financial changes before Nancy disappeared. According to what was mentioned, these issues created a certain amount of tension inside the family. Those changes may help explain why pressure existed, but they are absolutely not enough to prove any conclusion. In an investigation, possibilities may exist, but truth can only be confirmed by clear evidence. At this point, there was one detail considered the most important part of the entire case. Because even when cameras do not record everything, something else may still quietly keep information in a completely different way. It does not need explanations, does not depend on memory, and is difficult to ignore. In many investigations, this kind of small detail becomes the biggest turning point. Because some things can disappear from sight, but their traces do not disappear so easily. The most attention-grabbing piece in this case came from a medical device that works silently inside the body, the pacemaker. According to the information, this device not only supports the heartbeat, but can also store biological logs over time, such as heart rhythm, unusual changes, and in some models, even movement sensors. Imagine a close-up of that tiny machine with its signal light blinking quietly, while everything outside seems disconnected. The important point is this: even if the phone was described as losing connection at 2:28 inches the morning, the transmission of data to the outside may stop, but the internal record inside the device may still remain. Stopping transmission does not mean stopping recording. If those logs still exist and include clear time marks, they could become a special kind of biological witness, helping compare statements with what actually happened. However, this is only the technological possibility of the device, not a final investigative conclusion. If you are still watching this far, it means you can also feel that this case is not as simple as it looks on the surface. Every small detail is building a much bigger picture, and the most important part is still ahead, the timeline hour by hour. From that night to the next morning, what exactly happened? If you want me to continue breaking this down, clearly leave the number 1, so I know you want to go all the way to the end of this story. Another piece that made the case more complicated was the camera and security system of the house. According to the available information, there were recording gaps that did not look like a normal random error. Not only that, there was also information suggesting that access to the system was made using the correct login details, meaning it was not an outside break-in by force. However, if that idea is correct, it leads the analysis back to the same familiar logic: someone who understood the house, the daily routines, and even how the security system worked from the inside. What caught people's attention was not what the cameras recorded, but the empty space they left behind, because sometimes what does not appear is the very thing that makes people question the whole story again. Another detail mentioned, and perhaps the most sensitive part of the entire story, was a text message containing only one word: handled. According to the quoted information, this message was said to appear after communication signals were lost and was connected to a prepaid phone number. Just one short word, but enough to create many possible theories. However, this is also the moment when people need to stay the calmest. It must be clearly stated that this is information repeated from sources and has not received official confirmation, so it cannot be treated as a final conclusion or final evidence. In complex cases, shocking details are often the easiest to misunderstand when taken out of full context. One message can create many guesses, but real investigations do not work on emotion. They work on verification. The more sensitive the detail, the stronger the need for confirmation. When the full timeline is placed together through the important time marks, the picture starts to become clearer and also colder. Around 1:47 inches the morning, the doorbell and camera system were said to go offline. At 2:12, movement was detected, but normal footage was not saved. Then around 2:28, the app connected to the pacemaker was described as losing connection, and the next morning the family discovered that Nancy was no longer at home. Each time mark alone may seem small, but together they create an extremely important window of time where all attention is focused. That is why, if investigators have access to medical device data security system records and mobile data, the most important thing is not guessing, it is comparison. Every minute, every movement, every statement will be placed side by side to check what matches and what does not. To look at this case clearly and avoid confusion, it must be said first that this is analysis based on reconstructed information with the timeline of the 1st of February 2026, as described in the source, not a final legal conclusion. That is why the most important thing is separating information into 3 groups: what has been confirmed, what has been reported by sources, and what is still unknown. The clearly stated part includes Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, described as missing in Tucson, the involvement of the FBI, and Tommaso publicly saying, "I was there that night," along with the sentence, "She was not alone." The second group includes details mentioned by sources but without official confirmation in the same report, such as access to the security system using valid login details, the handled message, and analysis based on pacemaker data. And finally, the most important unknowns remain: where Nancy is now, who the second person was, and what truly happened during those night hours. I do not want the comment section to become a place for quickly blaming or judging anyone while the final truth is still not confirmed. What matters more is looking at the actual pieces of the investigation. In your opinion, which factor is the biggest key? The camera system and its missing recording gaps, the medical device data with its silent time marks, or the press conference statement that locked the timeline? Leave just one word: Cam Davis, or statement. Sometimes, One correct detail is enough to change the entire story. This video is not meant to conclude or accuse any individual. It only focuses on analyzing information, comparing data, and separating the level of confirmation for each detail. In cases like this, truth is not found in emotion, it is found in the timeline and in evidence. Until there is an official court decision, every rushed conclusion can lead in the wrong direction. If you want me to continue putting the timeline together minute by minute, second by second, and source by source, so we can see the full picture more clearly, subscribe and follow for the next part.